The director and narrator of the film is Roger Stahl, who is a professor of communication studies at the University of Georgia. He studies rhetoric and media and culture. And in large part, his work is focused on understanding propaganda and public relations as they relate to state violence, conflict, and security. He's written several books on what he calls the military entertainment complex, and that obviously is the topic of Theaters of War, which is a highly accomplished film of both filmmaking and journalism, and we are delighted to welcome him to System Update. Thank you so much for joining me. Good evening, and I know I'm a little belated with this, but congratulations on producing such an important and really compelling documentary.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind of you. Good to be on your show.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. So the trailer that we just showed mentioned Top Gun, and your film talks about films like The Hunt for Red October that obviously have, if not the heavy hand of the Pentagon and the CIA, certainly messaging that would please the people at the agency. So one of the things that I did not know before watching your film that really surprised me was that there are actual contracts that you got your hands on, that other people have gotten their hands on, that describe the legal relationship between these filmmakers that accept this relationship and these agencies. What do those contracts consist of? How do those work?
Well, that's kind of the meat of the deal. These two entities get together, the producers, the directors on the one hand, and the military or the CIA on the other, and it's not an ad hoc type of relationship. It is contractual, and it involves handing over the script, the entire script, responding to often 2 or 3 pages of script change requests of some kind, and if it's to the Pentagon satisfaction or the CIA satisfaction, then they go to the contract stage, and that's where they lay out exactly what the military is going to offer the production team and what the production team will do in return, which is stick to the script. And also, invariably, there's a screening at the end of the process so that the Pentagon can check their work and make sure that they followed all the official instructions.
So the question I'm sure that a lot of people have is, there's obviously no law that requires filmmakers to gain the approval of the Pentagon or the CIA or submit their scripts for approval. You couldn't obviously have such a law. And yet, a lot of filmmakers, including some of the most successful, some of the biggest names in Hollywood, do this seemingly with great enthusiasm and gusto. What is the motivation for why big name Hollywood filmmakers and producers and studios would submit their scripts and their film in general to approval from the Pentagon and the CIA?
You can almost boil it down to the profit motive. It's free stuff. It increases production values. It gives them the most bang that they can get for their buck. Gives them a sense of realism to the film, and puts them in a position where they are going to create a product that will be successful enough that, have I frozen up? A successful product that will then, launch that producer's career to the next film. So as long as people don't talk about it, as long as it doesn't erode support for the studio's bottom line, it's going to be a win-win for them. Unfortunately, it's a lose-lose for the American public.
Just for people who are watching, your audio is fantastic. We're hearing every word as clearly as we can. I think your video is a little bit frozen though, so you look like you're in some kind of natural setting, but I don't know if that's the issue. But anyway, we will make do. I'd much rather have a clean audio and a troublesome video than the other way around. But let me ask you something about Hollywood culture, because obviously the film does a great job of kind of making clear what the profit motive is, namely that, as one of the experts you interview says, the Pentagon has some really cool and expensive toys, and there's no substitute if you want to do some spectacular blockbuster film for having access to aircraft carriers or fighter jets or just very kind of expensive military hardware that the Pentagon will give to these films, often to destroy, in order to have access over their scripts. So that motive seems a little bit clear to me. I want to ask you what you think about Hollywood culture. I remember maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, a little bit before the Snowden reporting began, I went to an event in Hollywood that I was told was going to be Hollywood leftists, like I don't mean just liberals and Democratic Party adherents, but I mean like Hollywood leftists. And we went there and there were a lot of, maybe it was 60, 70 people, a lot of very big names in Hollywood were there. And when the part of the conversation began that was about foreign policy, it amazed me, this is the Obama era, how many of them were defending Obama's drone program, defending the regime change war in Libya, just in general kind of having the Hillary Clinton view. And a lot of them were actually Democratic Party adherents. They were not really leftists. Hollywood obviously has a reputation for being, it's the Hollywood left. And so I think it would surprise a lot of people to learn that Hollywood is churning out pro-Pentagon and pro-CIA propaganda independent of the profit margin that you've just laid out. Do you think there's kind of like an ideological component as well to why people in Hollywood throughout the Cold War and then in the War on Terror have been producing this sort of stuff?
Well, first let me say that your viewers might be wondering why I'm all frozen up and why you can only hear my voice. I've had to make do. We had this northeast storm come through, and this is the most creative I can get. So thank you for putting up with it.
We have a really cool image of your face now on the screen that matches the aesthetics of our show. So don't worry about it. We fixed it, and we're hearing you great.
We asked about the Hollywood left, and culturally, yes, there's a leftist contingent in Hollywood. I would say it's identifiable. But once you get past the border of the United States, once you talk about international issues, you're back to the dual party consensus, right? You're back to neoliberal democratic consensus of, the values of the military establishment or the values of the Democratic Party. And so there really isn't a lot of pushback, as you've noticed, apart from milquetoast renditions of Iraq and Afghanistan here and there that don't really take any critical steps. But beyond that, mixed with the profit motive of not wanting to anger the Pentagon system that is feeding a lot of the production of those sorts of images, you're not going to get much out of the Hollywood system.
Yeah, I think people sometimes forget that, Hollywood is very big business. It's like Wall Street or big tech or the insurance business, and the people who run it and the studio heads are part of gigantic corporations, and alienating and offending major parts of the U.S. government is not typically something corporate bosses try and do. I think the people in Hollywood like to think of themselves as artists, but at the end of the day, the people who are financing them and making them very rich have a much different motive than art in mind. One of the things that I thought the film did a great job of illuminating, and it's not something I had previously realized so much as well, is that it's not just films that are obvious to the public would be of interest to the Pentagon and the CIA about war and the military and the Pentagon, but even just kind of mass market, big cultural films like various Superman films or Godzilla, Jurassic Park. How is it that the CIA, the Pentagon, worms their way into those kinds of films, and what is the influence that they exert when it comes to those kinds of movies?
It seems like that started around 2007, 2008, Transformers and Iron Man. You have a big dip in public appreciation for the adventures in Iraq. So public opinion just took a nosedive. And so, Hollywood at the same time started to recognize the war movie as a genre as somewhat toxic, especially war movies about Iraq and Afghanistan. So you notice that all of those representations not only fell off the front page of the papers, but also off the movie screen. So, partly it's desperation. They need venues in order to push these narratives. And what's left? Well, Marvel movies and comic book movies, fantasy movies of different kinds. So Transformers, the first one, was the first film that featured cooperation from all four branches of the military. So they went all in on that. It was extremely successful, reached the right age demographic for recruiting, which is just one of their motives for getting involved in the movie business. And it kind of took off from there. So it became fantasy, comic book movies, and reality TV rather than what they'd done for the previous 40 or 50 years, which is get themselves heavily involved in war movies proper.
The things I think about a lot because of the work I do and the issues we report on and cover is I think a lot of people like to believe that they're immune to propaganda. I think we all like to believe that. And Yeah, propaganda oftentimes is very insidious. It's something that has been studied over many decades. It's a very sophisticated weapon. It involves the fields of psychology and sociology and is catered to the inner workings of our brain and what we as humans kind of crave and desire and what stimulates us. It's not something that's easily evaded, especially when it's kind of relentless, but particularly when it's a little bit hidden. And one of the things I thought was so interesting in this film was your point that propaganda is more effective when people don't anticipate it. So maybe if they sit down into a news show or they hear an interview with the Pentagon chief, they're kind of being armed against propaganda. But if you're just taking your kids to what seems like an innocuous Hollywood film, your kind of guard is down. There was a quote in the film that caught my attention where when people go to films, they're, quote, voluntarily sitting through a 2-hour infomercial. Talk about that component of it, and the reason why, especially maybe with the films that are less overtly militaristic, this propaganda is so effective in the eyes of the government.
Yeah, that quote was from a U.S. Army document that was talking about the effectiveness of their involvement with Lone Survivor. So they called it a 2-hour infomercial, and obviously didn't expect anybody to FOIA and do a Freedom of Information Act request on that particular document. So they're awfully guileless in a sense that they don't, even as public relations officers, don't really know how to speak in code so that they aren't found out later. So that's part of the interesting thing. But you're absolutely right that, when we think about propaganda, we think about government-produced stuff. And this is not exactly that. This is government-influenced entertainment. And you might see Zero Dark 30 and think, okay, the White House or the CIA had a hand in that. And yes, there was a big controversy about that eventually. But, when you watch Iron Man or watch Godzilla or even Jack Ryan, I mean, you're not expecting that there's going to be some sort of official entity combing through the script and getting rid of ignoble attributes or airbrushing history. So it speaks right to our sort of emotional centers in a way that traditional propaganda tried to do, but couldn't do as well as a narrative film.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.